when I left, I escaped on a motorcycle. And as I was driving away from the property, they were following. The security has like an SUV they call Rover, and they drive all over in this security truck. And as soon as I drove out, they were right there behind me. And so they intercepted me, so to speak, and they ran me off the road on the motorcycle. And that's essentially what allowed me to escape, is when they ran me off the road, somebody driving by on the highway called the police and said, hey, these guys ran this guy off the road in his motorcycle, and they're fighting on the side of the highway. And the security guards had a police scanner in their SUV. So they heard the call go out to the dispatch, from dispatch to wherever the nearest police were. And so as soon as they heard that, they drove off and left me there. And then the police basically escorted me from that location, 2 police cars, one in front and one behind me. They escorted me to a safe location that I could then escape from.
One thing we added when we printed the paperback edition of the book was the actual police report from when this incident Mark was escaping, which was very, very eye-opening.
Welcome to Indie Authors. I am super excited today to have Marc and Claire Headley, a dynamic duo who has quite a story to share. And we're going to do a little bit different today. Usually I read the bio, I read the blurb, but I think that you guys are so well experienced in being on YouTube because you have this wonderful channel, Blown for Good, where you talk about what we're about to talk about. And so you have all the practice, and I could not do it the service that you can. So please introduce yourselves.
My name is Marc Headley. I grew up in Scientology, and I worked at the international headquarters in the middle of the California desert from 1990 to 2005.
And Claire. My name is Claire Headley. I was born into Scientology in England. And I also worked at the headquarters of Scientology, which is where I met Marc. I worked there from 1991 until 2005. And
then 2005 is why we're here, correct?
Yeah, so basically where we worked at the international headquarters of Scientology, it's a very high security and top secret location even in all of Scientology. The members and any Sea Org members or staff members that aren't at the international headquarters, they don't know where that is located. It's literally a secret location that no one's allowed to know where it is, even though, which is really hilarious, you can just type into Google and you can say, where is the headquarters of Scientology? And it'll tell you right where it is.
So it's like the Area 51, if Area 51 hadn't become like so popular. Yeah.
It is literally the Area 51 of Scientology. That is the best analogy that I've ever heard for it. But yeah, so it's a top secret location. And in order to go and work at that place, you actually have to get what's called clearances. And you have to go through these special interrogations designed just for somebody that's trying to get to this property. So it literally, you get top level clearances to be able to work at that place. So the people, and this location is where all of Scientology internationally is managed from. And this is also where David Miscavige, who is the leader of the Religious Technology Center, that is also the location where he works and lives. And they have this brand new building that he had built. It's like a $50 million office building that has 6 to 10 people working in it. It's basically empty, and it's him and his staff that work in this building.
Is that the one that you an Aaron, who is another ex-Scientologist, and I'm going to provide all the information down below. Is that the one that you did the sort of walkthrough of the satellite photo, and you're pointing out all the different places?
That's exactly right. Yeah, we
Yeah.
did. There's somebody who did some drone footage of the property, not a Scientologist, just a drone YouTube guy. And yeah, we kind of we did a reaction video to that. And as we went all around the property, we kind of talked about the different places in a pretty quick, like, identify the building, what went on there, next building. It wasn't really super in depth. And then somebody actually from that video, and in the cover of my paperback book, in the right inside of it, it actually has an entire map of the property, and it lists in detail every single building and what it is, because I talk about pretty much probably most of the buildings and what went on and different parts of the headquarters I talk about in my book. And so yeah, so we provided a map so it'd make it easier for you to kind of like get an idea of where things are taking place in the book,
which I think is genius. And we have to introduce the book. So it's Blown for Good, and it's all about your escape. It's so crazy to think that one would have to escape from a situation in this day and age, other than maybe North Korea. And please, Kim Jong-un, don't send any operatives to my house for mentioning North Korea. But you don't really hear about having to escape from anywhere in the modern day. And yet here you guys are escaping from an associate. It boggles my brain.
Yeah. And it's detailed in the book, but in both of our cases, so I left on January 4th, 2005, and then Claire left a few weeks later. But when I left, I escaped on a motorcycle. And as I was driving away from the property, they were following. The security has like an SUV they call Rover, and they drive all over in this security truck. And as soon as I drove out, they were right there behind me. And so they intercepted me, so to speak, and they ran me off the road on the motorcycle. And that's essentially what allowed me to escape, is when they ran me off the road, somebody driving by on the highway called the police and said, hey, these guys ran this guy off the road in his motorcycle, and they're fighting on the side of the highway. And the security guards had a police scanner in their SUV. So they heard the call go out to the dispatch, from dispatch to wherever the nearest police were. And so as soon as they heard that, they drove off and left me there. And then the police basically escorted me from that location, 2 police cars, one in front and one behind me. They escorted me to a safe location that I could then escape from. So, and then when my wife, when my wife left, she was able to, she basically had somebody watching her 24/7.
Right.
Because then since whenever one spouse,
I was targeted as she's going to try and make a break for it,
yeah,
because her husband's gone. And by the way, just to add one note to what you just said, Mark, one thing we added when we printed the paperback edition of the book was the actual police report from when this incident, when Mark was escaping, which was very, very eye-opening.
Yeah. So when I wrote the book, I just said from memory what had happened. And I do have a pretty good memory. Like I would say it's not 100% photographic memory, but it's like semi-photographic.
When you combine our two together, it's pretty on point.
Yeah. But so when I escaped, probably like 4 years after I escaped is when I wrote the book in 2009. And so I had just basically written what happened from memory. And then when we got a hold of the police reports, we didn't know there were police reports in relation to my escape. Yeah. And then when we found out, somebody did a Freedom of Information Act, like documents request, and they got a hold of the police report. And I didn't know the police side of what it was happening, but with the police report in addition to what I had written was amazing. It was so accurate what I had written that it was sort of surprising. Like, you know, I know I have a good memory, but that was really good. But then we got to hear what happened on the police side, because when they were escorting me from the location where the police had run me off the road, I mean, the Scientology security guards had run me off the road. The police basically sort of met up with me right near that location. And so when they had determined, basically, I was playing it like I wasn't trying to escape. I was just, my friends and I we were just having an argument over something, but it's resolved. It's resolved because they left. That's how it was resolved for me. But I still didn't want to cause any trouble for Scientology, because I think that the retribution towards me would be greater. So I was like, no, it's all good. As soon as they figured out where I was leaving from, they saw my address. They're like, oh yeah, this dude's busting out.
We gotta run her.
Yeah. And the actual police report was filed under false imprisonment. So
Really?
they knew exactly what was going on. So one car was in front and one car was behind me. And while I was being escorted by the police, 2 different Scientology agents tried to follow them and follow me wherever they were taking me. And the police had to pull them over as they were escorting me. So that we literally had to wait while one cop pulled them over and then told them, hey, stop following us. And then we started driving again. And then another car came, and then they had to say, hey, stop. And that's all covered in the police report, which is in the paperback copy of my book. But so yeah, it was pretty eye-opening to see what the police thought of this whole thing. And later on, we ended up suing Scientology as well for false imprisonment and a bunch of different things. And then in that lawsuit, we deposed the police and then also their supervisor. And the only reason that a police report was actually even filed, because I didn't want to press charges. I just wanted to get out of there. And because they had escorted me and then also kept kicking the Scientology people out of the trail, I was able to get away, and they weren't able to find me after that. But it was the supervisor. Do I have this right, Claire? It was
Yes.
It was the police that pulled me over. It was their supervisor who had insisted that a report be filed, because she could see that I had a wife that was also at that same property, and she wasn't with me. So she said, if that girl tries to escape that's still there, we're going to need to have a record here, so that if something comes up where she's trying to leave and now they're trying to get her, we'll know, oh yeah, she's the wife of this guy. So it was very revealing to see that law enforcement was completely savvy to what was going on, even though I didn't tell them anything. I was just like, oh no, it's all good. I'm just trying to get to the U-Haul in San Jacinto. That's all. Just if you guys could help me get there, that'd be amazing.
So, but it's almost like, because from what I've read and what I understand, I mean, it's not like you're guarding any national secrets. It's not like you have the codes to nuclear weaponry or anything like that that would make you an actual, I guess it makes you a threat to Scientology by leaving, by speaking the truth. There are secret things that they don't want people to know, but the level of, and even the language used, like the agents coming after, it's so mind-boggling that this is completely like a military kind of organization. Well, because the sea base is all based on the Navy, right? Or sort of, it's got that.
Yeah. So when L. Ron Hubbard was starting Scientology, he started it in America. And then he started getting kind of chased down by law enforcement and different agencies, the CIA, the FBI. There was a lot of people interested in what he was doing because his writings were very subversive. And Scientology was born out of the Cold War. So like 50s and 60s, that's almost all of the Scientology writings that Scientology operate to this day were written by Hubbard in this era. And so it's very kind of like dead agent, black propaganda, all these different theories and ideas that Hubbard had were based off of all the stuff that was going on at that time. So that is how they operate. But he was getting chased around, so he ended up going to England, and then from England he ended up going to South Africa, and then he got kicked out of South Africa. And so finally it evolved to, I need to be in international waters because they keep coming after me no matter where we are on land. And so when he moved to the ocean, he started what was called the Sea Project. And the Sea Project became the Sea Organization. And that's the thing that you sign the billion-year contract to. And you're basically in the service of Scientology for life. And the Sea Org contract, this billion-year contract that always gets talked about, is more of a symbolic in nature than anything else. Obviously, you can't enforce a billion-year contract, but if you're signing up for a billion years, it's pretty much assumed you ain't going to be doing anything else this life, okay? Because you're not only saying, when I die, I'll come back and keep working, but so that pretty much locks it up for this life. They've got you. And so that was the main reason for it being called the Sea Organization. But also Hubbard was in the Navy. He did serve a few years in the Navy. And I think he really liked a lot of the stuff they had going in the Navy. So he pretty much ripped off that kind of operation to be able to basically get people just dedicated to service him as the management for Scientology. So all to this day, so the Sea Org, I think it was started in mid to late 60s. I think 67. Does that make sense, Claire?
Yeah,
something around there in the mid 60s.
I thought 68 or 69.
Yeah. So
close enough.
and when he set it up, they were basically his messengers or his direct disciples, and then they would have offices wherever there was a major Sea organization or Scientology presence. Then a Sea organization would be the top management organization for that area. So there's to this day, there's Sea Org members in Los Angeles, Clearwater, Florida, New York, Denmark, South Africa. In every major continent, there is a Sea organization, a continental Sea organization. And even though they're all on land now, except for one, which operates this cruise ship that they have in the Caribbean, that's the only Sea organization that operates in the sea. And which is really crazy because you've got all these people everywhere. There's probably about 5,000 Sea Org members internationally, and about 100 of them are working at sea.
That's so funny. Now, because Toronto does have, there used to be actually, okay, so I don't,
Yeah.
have
So
you been to Toronto?
That's called CLO Canada. Yes, I have been there.
Okay.
And so wherever there's a continent, like for instance, Canada, they have a CLO, Continental Liaison Office Canada. They have a CLO, what's called PAC, the Pacific Area Command. So that's in Los Angeles. And then they have a CLO East US and a CLO West US and a CLO ANZO, which is Australia, New Zealand. Yeah. CLO UK, etc.
So here's a little ditty about the one that isn't, well, it used to be on Yonge Street. And Yonge Street was a little bit seedy, like a little bit. But it was like on Friday and Saturday nights, people would go and they drive their muscle cars down there, and there was something to do, but it wasn't always safe. And so my friend and I used to just walk around, look at the people, and I can tell you, like, I had to avoid so many people standing outside saying, "Oh, come in and get something done." And they were like trying to recruit. And my mom so finally I said to my mom, I keep walking by this place in Scientology. And she's like, "Oh, don't go in there. No, don't go in there. You don't know what they'll do." And because nobody really knew what went on in there, but it was just like, don't go in there. But from what I recall, they were across the street from one of the biggest strip clubs in Toronto, the Brass Rail. And then at some point, and it was like, just we're talking a seedy stretch of the, yeah.
We
And
just talked about this the other night on one of my live streams on my YouTube
really?
channel.
Oh, that's so funny.
Because it used to be next to the strip club.
Yeah.
And then I think eventually the strip club closed down, and then it became a theater, and they played like the vagina monologues and whatever was there last was even more offensive to Scientologists than that was. And it was just ironic that of all the places they end up getting and operating out of is just nonsense happening all around them.
It doesn't make sense. So I think that, and you might know better, but I think that they still own the building, but they moved to a smaller location further downtown, like a small office, because I guess nobody's going anymore, or they don't serve as large of a congregation or something. So, but I don't know what they're doing.
The idea was that they were going to renovate it, and they were going to restore it and make it into this amazing thing. They have this program they've been running for like the past 10 or 15 years, which is called the Ideal Organization Program. And they spend millions and millions of dollars on like a historic property, and then they rehab it, or the property that they already have, they've had for so long that it's a historic property, and then they move somewhere and then renovate that. And they're at some stage of that, but they've been working on this for like the last decade, and they've just made zero progress. And it doesn't, in most places where they do this, the local Scientology members are the ones that pay for it. They fundraise. So they say, hey, we need $5 million to renovate this building. And then all those local Scientologists throw in some bucks until they get the 5 million. And I think they've been working on whatever amount they is. They've been working on it for 10 years, and they're nowhere near getting the amount of money. And mainly that's because they just don't have a lot of members in that place. That's where you can tell where they have the least members, because those buildings drag out unless they get a whale from Florida or California or somebody who just gives them the entire 5 million bucks, and then they pay for it. And then he gets the theaters named after him, or, whatever they do. Just they play the donor game just like everybody else does. We'll name the theater this, and we'll put a plaque up in the bathroom to say, throw a few bucks for us for a toilet, or, whatever it is.
It's just a shame, because if they sold it, they get a mint now, because there's a huge building boom in Toronto. And so you're seeing all over these huge, now they've started to convert office buildings into condos, because our population is off the charts at the moment. And so they would get so much money for that property, because people want to redevelop that stretch. But right now it's such a sort of desolate, it's in this weird state of transition. But anyway, so this is what I love, that not that you went through this experience, because I absolutely am. I love that you went through. No, I don't, because it was very traumatizing. But what I love is that you used the writing process almost as a way to maybe not heal, but to process.
No. This is something that I've heard from many other former members of Scientology and the Sea organization in particular, who have escaped, is that writing what happened is a very therapeutic process. So and I used to have nightmares for years after I left, not every night, but almost every night. And then I actually developed like a sort of a insomnia, because I didn't want to go to sleep, because I knew I was going to have one of these crazy nightmares. And so that was just kind of a dwindling spiral of like, a mental state. But then when I wrote the book in 2009, I was writing a lot of what had happened to me at the headquarters of Scientology. I was writing these like little blurbs, and I was putting them on the internet. And I started doing that in 2006, about a year after we had escaped. And then, and as I was doing this, more and more people were finding out about this, and it was starting to kind of make it into the press, and it was starting to make it into magazines and media, and it was sort of taking the bite, because they really harassed us after we left. And it was sort of like, hey, we just wanted to leave and do our thing. And then you guys kind of started messing with us. And they had people, even friends of mine that used to be in Scientology as well, were working for Scientology and feeding information to them and kind of getting involved in my business and trying to sabotage business contacts and business projects that I was in the middle of. So it was almost like, hey, you guys have been, we just wanted to leave and do our thing. And you guys have kind of just been there in the background, messing with me. And so then I started posting this stuff on the internet, started getting pretty popular. And I appeared on some radio shows and some other stuff. And even in TV programs in Germany, in Denmark, Australia. Yeah. And so, and then even in the UK. And then I basically, a lot of people are saying, oh, you should just write about a book about all this kind of stuff. And because I grew up in Scientology and then I started working for them in the Sea organization when I was 15 is when I actually signed my Sea Org contract. And then I worked at a organization in Los Angeles for almost a year before I went to the international headquarters. I didn't get a lot of schooling. I probably didn't finish, like, I would say, like, 12 to 14, depending on what school system you were in. That's probably where my education ended. So I didn't think that I would be able to write a book and that anyone would even not only not want to read it, but be able to read it. Like, it would just be so horrible. And so the people that kept asking kind of convinced me. And then Claire was pretty supportive. She's just like, yeah, sure, I think you should do it. I'm sort of like, yeah, of course you're going to say that. You'll say anything, like, but I ended up writing. Yeah. And then we had talked to some former members that had also written books, but they'd never been published. They would either, the publisher would get sued or they'd threaten to sue the author. And so I was trying to think of, like, how can I do this? And then Claire read some books on how to self-publish a book. And when she read that, it was sort of like, yeah, we could do this. We just need a few little pieces, and we could get something together, and we can actually just release the book ourselves. And this was before Kindle, or maybe right when Kindles were starting to come out, and when Amazon was starting to kind of host books. Like, you could put a book on there and then they could fulfill it, or you could fulfill it, but there was no self kind of publishing part of Amazon at this time. And then there was this other legal aspect with Scientology threatening to sue everybody. So that all pushed us towards, we got to do this ourselves, because if I go with the publisher, and this had happened to the other woman that I spoke with, is that she got paid, she wrote the book, she gave it to the book, Scientology threatened to sue them, and they essentially, either Scientology bought the rights to her book, or the publisher just said, we're never going to publish it, because they're just going to sue us, and we'll spend more money on legal than we'll make on publishing your book. So here's the rest of your money, and we're done with you. And then they owned her manuscript, but she got paid. So it's kind of like, well, that's the end of it. So based on all that, we knew we had to do it ourselves. Yeah. And Claire was really the one who did the getting the book produced. And then we needed these other parts. And we used to work at the international headquarters of Scientology. And it just so happened that for the last, I'd say 10 years we were there was this big book project where they were going to take all these books that Hubbard had written all the way back from the 50s all the way forward, and they were going to reproduce them and repackage them so that they all looked the same and they all kind of were a series, because these things had been coming out and re-released and reproduced for the last 30, 40 years, and they all looked different. They were all different sizes. There was no rhyme or reason to any of it. So they used this as an opportunity to kind of standardize them. And the guy that had done the design work had also escaped from the international headquarters. And then, and one of the guys that had edited all of these books, or many of the books, had also escaped. So I was sort of like, well, those are the two pieces I need. I need a designer and I need an editor. So I was sort of like, let's see how this will work. And sure enough, I called the design guy up. He lives in I think he was in Finland or
he really escaped. He like
Norway. Oh yeah, no, he like left
like,
the country, escaped. And he was still doing that sort of design and web work and web design and stuff like that. So I sent him the manuscript. He did an amazing like action cover of me escaping on the motorcycle and the police and the security guards and he did a really cool cover for me, and all the text and the inside cover and the back cover and the entire book. He designed the whole thing, even like the embossing and everything. And I think he also generated the file that we would end up using to make the Kindle, even down to that. And then
he did the map as well.
Yeah, and he also made the map of the entire property off of like Google Maps. He went on Google Maps and did a fancy artwork thing. I don't know how he did it, but it was amazing. And at the time, not only was there this secret property, but no one had ever made a map of it. That's even like, what? And there weren't even drones in 2009 that you could, do something like this. But so we kind of pulled all these guys together and we made a book. And because we didn't have a publisher, we worked directly with a printing company. And we sent them, they said, these are the files we need. And we got all that and sent it over to them. And one day a whole, pallet, like a whole bunch of pallets just showed up at our house and we had 5,000 hardback books. And it was sort of kind of like, oh, wow, this is really happening.
But I like the approach that you guys took, because you had figured out your break-even point. And then you had sort of asked or had people sign up for pre-orders to ensure that so that was so smart to cover your costs.
So whatever we spent on the book, we then were kind of like, well, we're going to need to know how we're going to be able to sell these. And so I put a poll up on one of these websites or forums that I was posting on. It was like, hey, if I write a book, who would spend $25 on it or whatever? And I think we had like over 1,000 people that said yes, I would buy it. So we're like, okay, if we just sell 1,000 of the 5,000, then we'll be whole again. And I want to say we came out in November. I want to say before the end of December, we had sold 2,000 copies. So it was, we made everything back. And then, everything after that, I would always say every time we sell a book after this, it's Starbucks money, like I'll get myself a coffee.
College education fund.
Yeah.
That's the other thing
And then we do actually put the money that we make on the book goes to the kids' college funds. So
that's awesome.
It's sort of like,
because we told our
see.
kids, hey, we didn't get to go to college. We didn't even get to finish high school. So you can bet your bottom dollar you guys are going to have that opportunity.
But I also wanted to touch on the fact, and this has been brought up in other videos, and we spoke about it during our initial conversation, about how well spoken, even though you don't go through like formal education, you have this whole dictionary training. And so you probably have, amongst the general population, have the highest level of vocabulary, because you had to look up probably I don't even know how many words you would have had to look up at this point, but
I don't know if it's millions, but it's definitely in the tens of thousands. So when it's kind of a weird thing in Scientology, but they basically consider that if you have a misunderstood word, then that can lead to all sorts of nonsense, like criminality, escaping Scientology, not wanting to do anything that's bad in Scientology.
Critical thoughts about Scientology.
Any critical thoughts, rebellion, a wide plethora of bad things in Scientology all stem from a misunderstood word. So Hubbard was very, very clear that you can never, ever read a word that you don't understand and then keep reading. You have to look it up in the dictionary. And not only do you have to clear the definition that matches what's in the writing, but you have to clear all the other definitions. Like, so if it's a word that has 4 definitions, you have to clear the one that it makes sense with the writing. And then you have to use it in sentences until you fully understand it, which they kind of say like could be like, 10 to 15 sentences for that one word. And then you have to go back and then you have to clear every other definition, use each one of those in sentences. Then you have to clear the derivation and you have to fully understand the word and in every possible usage and every possible definition.
And don't forget the part where if there's any words in any of those
definitions. Oh yeah. So then if you find a word, if you find a word in the definition that you don't understand, then you have to do the same thing for that word. So they used to have these things in Scientology called word chains. You could spend days and days and days buried in a dictionary just trying to clear this one word. And you'd be like 20 words deep that you're just like, I'm never going to get back to that original word.
Did you have to write them all out? Like, did you have to document it or just read about them?
Oh no, when this is another thing. So everything in Scientology is 100% micromanaged. So when you're on a job and you make widgets, you have to count exactly how many widgets you made. And if you had 50 widgets last week, you got to have 51 widgets this week and 52 the next, and so on. And every Sea organization member is required to study Scientology or receive Scientology counseling for 2.5 hours a day. And normally you'll work all day, and then after dinner, you'll go to study. It's called to go in counseling or go to study. And you have to do that for 2.5 hours. And then you go back to work after that until 11 o'clock or midnight each night. And so when you go to study, when you're a student, you're studying and you have what's called student points. So each time you clear a word, you get 5 points. Each time you read a page, you get 3 points. And so you have to keep a tally during your 2.5 hours of everything you've done, because tomorrow you have to do more. You can't do less studying and get less student points. And then this week's student points have to be more than last week's student points. And at
the end of each period, you calculate up your total points and you mark it on a graph. So you can actually see if you're up or down the next day.
And so everybody who's studying is doing a course, and a course could have, let's say a course has 10 modules and each module takes a week. So it's expected to be a 10-week course. And if you go over that amount of time, then that's sort of like, okay, something's wrong, because this is how long this takes and you're taking too long. So then you get eyes on you and you start getting interrogated. And the funny that this is crazy, because I just realized this now, the course room that you study in has what's called a course supervisor, and their statistic is your statistic. It's student points, but it's every student's student points. So they're trying to get you through it. And then the other statistic that they have is course completions. So if their stats are down and their points are down and all these things, then the supervisor's on your ass. Like, hey, you need to get through this. You've been on this course for 20 weeks and I'm about to get in trouble. And, all these. So whether you're working or whether you're studying, there's all this eyes on you and all these performance metrics that you have to make. And if you don't make them, it's because you have a misunderstood word.
Of course.
And that's how this whole thing comes full circle, is because you just learn. If you don't know what it is, you could literally just be reading something and go, oh, look that up. And it's like second nature. And you not only do you look up a lot of words, but L. Ron Hubbard wrote millions and millions of pages of just complete nonsense. And he used to be a fiction writer in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s. And so he's writing all this nonsense, and he's trying to use as many highfalutin words as he can throw in there. So sometimes you're looking up words that you can't even, they're not even in a dictionary. And so Scientology had to make their own book.
Oh, come on.
Called the Hard to Find Words book. And it literally had probably 10,000 words in it that you couldn't even find in a dictionary. And somebody had located the original book where it was used in 1927. And they had a copy of that. And then they put that into a sleeve. And that's in this Hard to Find. So they have a whole room in every single Scientology organization, which has all of the words and the definitions that Hubbard has ever used in anything. And it's in this place, in every single place, because he made it such a crime to pass up any words that in the 50, 60 years that people have been studying, they have literally found the definition to every single word that he ever used.
So it's like some weird MLM with the point system where everyone under you is scoring on top.
And in the Sea Org, so we worked 7 days a week. In the Sea Org, you have, because he ripped off a lot of stuff from the Navy, you have port and you have starboard watches. So in the Navy, port is one side of the ship and starboard is the other side. And so half the people there have days off on this weekend, and then the other half have next weekend. And the only way you can get a liberty, which is you basically have from Sunday lunch to the end of the night, you have off. Sunday mornings are reserved for doing your laundry. So everyone in the Sea Org can do their laundry on Sunday morning. And of course, there's only wherever you live.
Two machines or whatever.
I was just going to say, it's like one of those things, like you live in an apartment building that has like 4 machines, because people are going to do their laundries at different times. 4 machines is fine. But when you have 500 people trying to use 4 machines all at the same time, there's logistics issues that happen. But either way, Sunday morning is when you're supposed to do your laundry, and then you could get the rest of the day off. But if your statistics were not up for that week, that was also your Liberty week, then you couldn't get the day off. So, and there's another thing that I'm going to probably do a whole video about it on my channel. But for a while, we also had these things called team share cards. So you had a bonus card, you had a social card, you had an allowance card, you had a food card, and you had a housing card. And if you were doing something that your senior didn't like, he could say, give me a card, and he'd take one of those cards from you. And the only way you could get the card back is if you had up statistics that week, and you could get 1 card back. And depending on how much of a rebel you were, you could lose 5 cards in one conversation. So like your boss would say, you need to get your statistics up. I can't believe you're down again this week. And you're like, oh yeah, well, if this happened, and then I wouldn't, give me a card. And then you can be like, what? You can't take a card from me. Fuck you. And then be like, oh, give me another card. And so you could literally, by the end, I think I've had like 4 conversations where I lost all 5 cards in one conversation. It was like, oh yeah, what, you only want 2 cards? What about the other 3? What am I going to do with those at this point?
Mark has always been a rebel.
Yeah.
So those cards, like, would they give you access to your apartment? Would they give you access to your, okay. So like, what are the cards?
Like a credit card that said Golden Air Productions, Team Share, Social. And it just had your name embossed into it, like a credit card. Like they had the same machine that punches the names into the credit cards. They had that same machine. So they just put your name in it. But if you wanted to go, if they had like pizza.
Birthing card.
Yeah.
If you lost your lodging card, you were supposed to be assigned to what they called Pig's Birthing.
Yeah. So if you lose your birthing card, then you go to Pig's Birthing. And Pig's Birthing is basically like where the scumbags stay that aren't allowed to leave the property, and no one cleans the room, and it might not have a bed in it. It might just have a floor, and you just go find a blanket from somewhere and sleep on the floor. Or there could be 10 people and it's only meant for 3 people to sleep in there. There could be 10 people assigned. Well, there you go. You got to figure it out with those 10 people where you're going to sleep and how you're all going to fit. It wasn't the most popular system because it was heavily abused. So if your boss was mean, then he would never allow you to get past a certain amount of cards, because that kind of keeps you in his pocket. If you've got all your cards, you're kind of like, do whatever. It doesn't really matter. And also there was a time period where we weren't allowed to take liberties and we weren't getting bonuses. So those top 2 cards were sort of like throwaway cards. Like your statistics go down, you lose your social security card, like whoop-de-doo, it doesn't even matter. So for a long period of years, they just said no one has a social card or a bonus card. We're keeping all those. So now the first card you lose is your allowance card. So you lose your pay if you get that card. And we were only making $50 a week, and they were taking taxes out of that. So we were getting $46.26 or something like that after taxes. And then you lose your pay card. So now you don't even have that. So then you would just have food and birthing left. And if they took your food card, then you'd have to eat beans and rice or whatever was left. Like the galley wasn't obligated to put out beans and rice for you. So if you went and there were no beans and rice and there was no leftovers, then you just didn't eat. So, and it would take a week to get a card back. So if you lost a card on Friday, the statistics are tallied up every Thursday. So it'd take till next Thursday before you could say, can I please have my pay card or my food card or my whatever card you lost back? So basically, it's just a giant shit show at this place.
No
I don't know. But can I say bad words on here?
Yeah, absolutely.
End of the world.
But you know what? Because when you were saying that thing about the washing machine, it reminded me of the portion of the book where you were talking about that first day that you were like, everybody takes a shower, and there was that whole shower scene, and you had to run to find the shower slippers because you couldn't go.
Yeah.
Like it
that's the other thing is all of the policies for the Sea Organization were written by Hubbard when they were at sea. So there's like a rule, like you're not allowed to take a shower more than 2 minutes or something like that, because they had freshwater tanks and they had gray water tanks, and there was so many people, and they were on this boat in the middle of the ocean. So it's like, hey, you can't use water, like get yourself wet, then soap your body, then rinse yourself, then do your shampoo, whatever it was, is like, don't use water. Another weird policy they have is if you have to make more than 10 copies of anything, it has to be mimeoed.
Oh,
so you wouldn't be able to use a copy machine because, this is in the 50s in the middle or 60s in the middle of the ocean. Getting their hands on some toner was like a $700 endeavor, so they didn't want to make any copies. But so even at the international headquarters, when we were still there, if you had to make 20 or 30 or 40 copies of something, you had to write this proposal, and they had to shoot a print, and then they had to put it on an ink press, and they had to ink the press. And it was like a whole thing for 50 copies of something. But because Hubbard had written these policies, and his policies, he also wrote a policy that says his policies are unalterable and are written in stone until the end of eternity. So you have all these archaic things that everybody has to follow that make no sense whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And that is essentially how everything in Scientology is. So the technical, the auditing, all these things that were dictated by Hubbard, they can never change. So that's why people are like, well, now that the internet, Hubbard didn't, even in all of his glorious future tripping nonsense that he wrote, he never imagined the internet. And the internet is killing, is basically dismantling Scientology day by day. It's just kind of picking parts of everything. Their whole system of everything is based on secrecy and based on people not talking to other people. Even when they expel members, they do what's called, they declare them a suppressive person. And once somebody in Scientology is declared a suppressive person, they become kryptonite to any other Scientologists. And Scientologists are not allowed to speak to them because they could tell them something that's a secret that Scientology charges $500,000 for. And if people are just giving those secrets out for free, well, that ruins their whole foundation. And that's essentially what's been happening for the last 20 years, is people have just been spilling the beans.
That's also the reason for the full title of the book, Blown for Good, Behind the Iron Curtain of Scientology.
Yeah.
Because they do not like their secrets being exposed at all.
Yeah. They're big proponents of, if you leave, you keep your mouth shut. And also in the book, a lot of people ask, what does that mean, blown for good? Well, in Scientology, anytime you make an unauthorized departure from a course or from auditing or from the C organization, they call that a blow. And coincidentally, blows they're basically created by the misunderstood word. So they believe that anyone who escapes or anyone who blows a course or counseling or the C organization or Scientology itself, they consider that person blown. And in a lot of cases, they send out a squad, basically like a hit squad, to recover that person and bring them back. And so there were people that worked at the international headquarters that had escaped 4 or 5 times previously. And each time this hit squad went out and recovered them. And they actually have a procedure. It's called the blow drill. And when someone escapes from the international headquarters, a blow drill is called. And this is all, there's a whole chapter in my book about all these different kind of drills that they hold. But basically, someone goes to the bus station, somebody goes to the airport, somebody goes to the parents' house, the sister's house, the brother's house. They go anywhere where that person is likely to show up. And as soon as he shows up, they grab him and they bring him back. And
it's terrifying.
When I left and I started posting stuff on the internet, I just thought it was cheeky. I was like, I'm blown, but I'm blown for good. Like I'm never coming back. I'm not getting recovered. You're never going to see me there ever again. And so then when I ended up writing the book, I was trying to figure out, what is this? I should call it that. I'm just going to call it blown for good. Who cares? That's what everybody knows me as. That's what I'm going to name the book. And then we added the tagline, blown for good, behind the iron curtain of Scientology. That seemed to be, because a lot of people would ask me, well, what would you describe it as? And I would say, well, it's like its own little city or its own little country. And you don't know what's going on outside the gates of that place, because they give you all this false propaganda and they give you all this, like everyone who works at that place thinks everyone in the world thinks Scientology is amazing. They don't know that people think they're a giant joke and that the leader's wife is missing it. No, they all think that everyone loves Scientology. Scientology is helping everybody full time, and they're doing good. Everything they're doing to make cassettes or DVDs or whatever we were doing, they think they're like saving the planet. They think they're what's called clearing the planet, which means get every single person in the world where they don't have these negative thoughts affecting them. And that's when you become clear in Scientology. And Scientology's ultimate goal is to clear every single person on the planet so that everyone follows Scientology. And so when you go past that property and you go outside and you find out, like, what? No, they're making jokes about us. And they're like, oh my God, we're like the laughing stock. And you're like, what?
Well,
anyway, so that's where I thought it's like behind the iron curtain. They thought everything was great in there. And every once in a while, somebody would escape and they'd be like, oh man, they're like doing dastardly shit behind those walls, man.
But it is interesting that they were able, until like South Park, right? South Park was a real moment of clarity, and probably a bit before that. But like when I was saying I would walk by, that was probably the early. I want to say it was the really early 90s, because I was old enough to like go out. I was in my teens at that point. And again, like I told you, like nobody was really sure, even though we discussed that I know some people who I guess are still active, but in Scientology, but there was this mystery that surrounded it, and it did seem like there was a lot of positive things as a philosophy. And we talked about this, that it had originated as a philosophy, and then I guess it became sort of like changed into this religious movement because of taxes.
Yeah, that was only because of taxes. There's even writings where Ron Hubbard says Scientology is not a religion, and then some people were like, anyway, the religion thing is going to help us on the tax and this.
So it's like persecuted is a religion.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, of course it's a religion. Absolutely, I've been saying that all along.
Yeah,
and,
but it's not a religion; it's an applied religious philosophy. Oh, here's your tax bill. Oh, never mind, we're a religion.
Yeah, every early Scientology book says Scientology is a study of the mind, and it's called the study. Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard says, means it's the study of knowing, or knowing how to know. And and then later on it's like, oh yeah, no, it's applied religious philosophy, and you're just like, what? Totally a manufactured thing, so we can make some more money and also get away with a ton of shit that otherwise would be not cool.
So this is the thing though, because like now in learning, there's that idea about, like, I think it's called metacognition, and where it's learning how to learn, right? That's a big sort of movement towards understanding how we learn and applying these specific ways of learning. And so he obviously was ahead of his time, and that's why it's sort of a pity that it got all out of control and went to places maybe it shouldn't have gone, like the philosophy itself.
I mean, the guy was a genius. He built a thing, and this is really the Scientology. They have two sides of their bridge to total freedom, and one is counseling and one is training, and you have to kind of go up them side by side, because you can't get certain counseling unless you've done this amount of training, and you can't do the training unless you're at this certain level of counseling. So you kind of have to go both sides of the ladder of this bridge to total freedom. And when you're doing that, like, you could get into Scientology from a course because they said, hey, we made you do this test. They have this test called the OCA, the Oxford Capacity Analysis Test. Has nothing to do with Oxford. Hubbard just thought, oh, that'll get him in. It sounds official. It's the OCA, the Oxford Capacity Analysis. Nothing to do with Oxford. You do this questionnaire, and from that questionnaire, they can pretty much, they could, for most people, they can be like, oh, this guy's got bad relationships, or this guy, he's got low self-confidence, or so they know what your button is right off the bat. And they say, hey, we've got a $50 course on how you can have a good relationship and how you can have like interpersonal relations, how you can improve those. And the guy says, that's amazing. I'm going to do that. And then 15 years later and $5 million after his fourth divorce, he's like, I suck at relationships. And I've, just wasted my whole life on this nonsense cult. But when you're going up these counseling and these training things that you do, you're building this whole house of cards around yourself, and you can't figure out what the next thing is until you do the next thing. And then as you do the next thing, but you're the architect of this mental prison that you're building, and they're just helping you do it. And you are like, I gotta, and that's the other thing. When you get in, you're like, I gotta fix relationships. Well, after you do 5 courses in Scientology, you find out you have another 100 problems that you didn't even know about. And they're setting you up for all the rest of these courses that you're going to do. They're like, oh yeah, no, you need to learn how to communicate. Oh yeah, that's probably why I have bad relationships. Okay, yeah, no, but you also have a low ethics level. Okay, so I got to fix that. That's probably why I have bad relationships. And you sort of, you learn about all these problems, and they basically make you think that you have all of these problems now, and the best way for you to not have them is to do these things. And as you do those things, you then forget or think, oh, I don't have that problem anymore. But you never thought you had that problem until they told you did. And then after you did a bunch of their hooey,
they even call that need for change. So if
Yeah.
somebody's like, oh yeah, no, I don't need it, that they say, oh, well, we just have to basically wake the person up to make them realize that, yes, they do need all of these things.
This is like the ultimate gaslighting. Like this is taking
totally
gaslighting to a whole different level. And the other thing, Ron Hubbard kind of reminds me of P.T. Barnum, like a real great showman creating this demand. And isn't it like, we talked about the irony in this, that Scientology is essentially being taken down by writers, and he was a writer, and so the very tool that he was able to use to create this entire thing is now being destroyed by it. But I want to point out that I read one of his science fiction books.
Yeah.
No.
Well,
I wasn't a fan.
Which one did you read out of
I can't even remember what it was because it was so confusing. And there was, I'll get back to you because I must have put it in I have a reading journal because of course I do. Yeah. I'm a nerd. But I'll look it up. And I just thought, because I kept hearing his name again. I guess this was a while ago, and I didn't fully understand what Scientology was, but I was like, what? He was a science fiction writer. Hold on. And so then I, went and just found one online, and I guess, or from the library, and read it. And I thought, well, what's the big deal about this? And so he was okay. He was prolific. He wrote a ton, and that in
it was
itself,
a quantity versus quality situation.
And I think it was in the heyday when like the pulp fiction, like literally pulp fiction was the thing where you'd pick up a small book, read it. They were cheap. They were like 25 cents each or something.
Yeah, and that's where the first article that he wrote, Dianetics, it appeared in Astounding Science Fiction. That was the first place he put it. And it's funny because, like Joe Rogan or different people will be like, you guys didn't like pick up on the fact that this dude was a science fiction writer that started a religion, and you go like, no. And in Scientology, they've created this whole folklore that because he's lived millions and millions of lifetimes over trillions of years, that he has total recall on all his past lives, and all those stories that he wrote, science fiction on other planets and other galaxies and Westerns and this and that, they were just his memories that he was just recalling and writing down. So they've even built this whole thing that would normally be a giant red flag. The dude that was a science fiction writer started a space alien cult. Oh yeah, that's not funky. Well, no, they're saying, well, yeah, he did. Because he remembered all those things. That's why these stories are so just 100% nuts. And another thing that not a lot of people know is there's a book that he wrote called Battlefield Earth.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Battlefield Earth is the story of Scientology and Xenu and that whole thing, because the psychiatrists, Lord Xenu, you learn about inside of Scientology, you learn about Lord Xenu on operating level, it's operating Thetan level 3. And that is usually anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 to get to that level. But you basically learn about more. This.
I'd say or more.
I think somebody said 300,000 is kind of like the top amount that you could spend to get that high. But you learn that this space intergalactic overlord, Lord Xenu, he came to Earth and he did this whole thing. But when he did that, he basically impregnated everybody with these little baby aliens from the planet that he was at. But his henchmen were psychiatrists and the government, like the tax man. So psychiatry and the IRS, okay, just happen to be the two mortal enemies of Scientology on Earth. But they're also they have an intergalactic confederacy where they have psychiatrists and IRS people as well. Anyway, but
because
the story,
of course, the IRS and psychiatry didn't start here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that was a gift
They're
from an
enemies
ancient.
on the whole track.
Yeah. So Battlefield Earth is loosely based on that story. And in the movie, the aliens are called cyclos that come and take over the planet. And that's kind of a nod to psychiatrists.
Right.
And and then the guy who saves everybody, I think his name is Johnny. I can't remember his name
Johnny
now.
Goodboy Tyler.
Johnny Goodboy Tyler. He's a Scientologist, and he's the one who saves everybody.
So, but here's another ironic bit, right? So, this whole anti psychiatry or mental health angle in Scientology is it boggles my mind that there's so much psychological damage being done within it, and they say I don't think it's fair. I'm going up against Joe Rogan, but I don't think it's necessarily fair for people to say, well, didn't you think this? Because anybody can believe anything. Like if you, and especially you guys who went in as children, and so you just are taught what you're taught. You're taught a philosophy and you believe it. And I mean, that's why abused families stay together, like people who suffer abuse.
Totally.
Right? Like I remember I had a job and the manager was really awful, but I was afraid because I didn't want to obviously lose my job. And I had an interview with someone else and I was scared to take the other job to do that transition. And they're like, this is almost like you're in an abusive relationship. Like, what are they telling you? And then I thought, oh my goodness, I've started to believe that I'm only good. So it's the narrative that you tell yourself. And this whole thing is, the whole philosophy is based on a narrative of this one man's opinion. And then you repeat it over and over again. You do all these courses, probably having to redo some courses because it's more money for the organization.
And even more insidious than that is each time. So like when you first do Dianetics auditing, they tell you you have what's called engrams, and these engrams are stored in your subconscious mind, and they affect your behavior and your bad decisions, and anything that's bad in your life is from these things called engrams. And then you do the Dianetic auditing and you get rid of you erase the engrams, and then that's how you become clear. And when you become clear, they say, okay, you no longer have this reactive mind, which has stored all these bad memories. And now you can become an operating Thetan and start doing that. Well, then when you find out about Xenu, you find out, well, you really didn't have a reactive mind. Those bad decisions and those bad behaviors and everything that makes anything go sideways are these things called body thetans, and they're the things that are bad, and then they're telling you what to do. And then you find out on the next OT level, no, it's not the body thetans that are telling you that. The body thetans themselves have reactive minds, and they need to be, so it's like literally every time you do the next thing.
You do still have body thetans because you have some of them have drug memories, so you have to address it from a different perspective to actually get rid of those.
So each new, and then finally when you get to OT8, you find out that you are a god and that you created the body thetans, you created the reactive minds, you created it everything yourself. Because as a game,
find out who you are or something like that.
And so but literally it's a bait and switch, and then a bait and switch on top of a bait and switch on top of a bait and switch. And so as you and this is what I was saying, you're building this prison and you're building this house of cards, and you don't know the way out. And when they tell you the way out, they're like, you're the one that built the trap, and we're telling you how to unbuild the trap. And then, but you realize after all that, you're like, I built the trap because you told me to build the trap. And so that's really why it's so insidious, because these people, and because Scientology is so expensive, people are motivated to make a lot of money to pay for Scientology. So that's where you get this component of, well, who's paying for all this, and how's this thing have so much money? But there's not that many people in it. because the Scientologists are motivated to give money to Scientology. And the only way you can do that is to make a ton of money. And so there's a lot of multi-level marketing, and there's a lot of scammy things, and they're ripping people off, and staff members are stealing credit cards and ringing. And so there's all these financial irregularities that are going on that are encouraged because Scientology is going to benefit. And if you have to go to jail and if you embezzled from the government, you did all this stuff, that sucks. We already got the money.
Yeah,
so
but we're good. So.
Sucks to suck, so see you in 10.
So, but that goes back to the legal power, or the whole thing about all these people being paid off to not publish their narratives or their memoirs, because they have all of this money behind them that they can just use to drag you out in court. So it was like genius that you guys were like, no, we're going to do this on our own. And also, I wanted to point out that the book that you, Claire, had looked at all those years ago was How to Self-Publish by something Roth.
I think it's called The Complete Guide to Self-Publishing by Tom and Marilyn Ross.
Oh, Ross. Okay, I had Roth written down. Okay. This is the other thing that always makes me think, like, there must have been good stuff in Scientology, because you all came out with these skills that you had to learn while you were in there. You were doing all these different projects and even though maybe some of the technology was antiquated, but it seems like there's a lot of really talented people that escape essentially and are able to.
I would say that for me personally, like Marc learned technical skills, but he was already inclined to that from well before he was a staff member. Personally, I was a course supervisor, a counselor. Like, my training in Scientology did not translate into real world skills or capability. And to me personally, I think the catalytic impact of getting the heck out of there and having to start a life over from scratch, that's what I attribute a lot of our success to personally, not Scientology.
Okay, so we won't give them any credit, but there must be something in you that, like you said, that makes you want to. Yeah,
we did get out of there. We made the right choice and got out of there. It was by no fault of our own that we landed in that place in the first place. And of course, we were again, speaking for me personally, leveraged by. They had complete control over me because they had my family and all of these, anyone I'd ever known. It was everything I'd grown up in. So walking away from that was a big deal.
It's just like any other culture. If you grow up in that culture, you don't know anything else. So you don't know that it's right. You don't know that it's wrong. You're being told, this is what my parents want me to do. This is what my family, everyone around me, my school, everything is all geared that this is how you're going to graduate this thing. And even for me, that I went to Scientology schools until, probably got to 13, 14, in a Scientology school. And that's not even as good as a regular school, because they're emphasizing on the Scientology aspects of learning, not history and math and that's kind of like whatever. You need to know how to read, but besides that, who cares about any pre-college or algebra or any of that? It's like whatever. So when you get to be a staff member, that's like the first dedicated level of service to Scientology. But if you're a Sea Org member and you're signing a billion-year commitment, you can't do anything more than that in Scientology than to become a Sea Org member. That's the best. And even Sea Org members look down on the people that have donated $10 million or $5 million. Yeah, they're giving money. They're not giving their life.
They're not giving service.
So my mom, I didn't have a really good relationship with my mom when I was growing up, but when I joined the Sea Org, it was like, what doesn't matter? It all worked out for the best. You couldn't make us any prouder, kind of thing. And you're like, really? That was the thing? Because I'm so selfless that I'm going to do this thing to help people. But I was in a bad place. I was 14 or 15 on my own. I didn't live with my mom, and my dad had moved out of state, and I'm basically paying rent and trying to do school and trying to do a job and trying to figure out how I'm going to have enough money to make bologna sandwiches for the week. And so the C organization was like, oh, we're just going to take care of everything. And we're going to give you, a couple bucks at the end of the week. And you don't have to worry about it. And you don't have to finish school, and you don't have to pay bills. And it's like, oh, so as a 15-year-old, I'm like, well, yeah, of course I took the easy road out.
Right.
The easy road that was also something that my mom would think was a good thing. So it was sort of like, okay, I guess I'll do it.
It's so predatory.
Yeah. And almost all of the people that are in the Sea Org as of right now, because we left 2005. So it's been like 17 years since we were there, but almost all of the Sea organization that's there now are second generation members. So their family is in, and that's the person they want, because if your family is not in there and you're working all these long hours, you're not making any money, and people are abusing you and yelling at you and screaming, and there's physical attacks, like, I'm out, because the leverage they have is your friends and family. So if you just came in off the street and were like, oh, I want to do this, I want to help people or do whatever, you could leave. There's nothing they can do to you. But these people that grew up in it, you basically, and when we left, we had to say, we're going to go. We won't have to put up with this abuse, but we're never going to see our families again. And we had to, and even when I had left before her and I got a hold of her and she said, I want to come with you. I said, babe, if you come with me, you're never going to see your family ever again. You're just not. You have to make that sacrifice. If you want to escape, you have to not have a family anymore. So that is even having done it, I can say that's going to be one of the hardest decisions you're ever going to make in your life. Do you want to be part of a scam that steals money and breaks up families and does all these horrible things? Or do you want to be able to see your family? And that's a Sophie's choice. Of course, the right choice is to not help those people, but you have to sacrifice. Your family has to be sacrificed in order for you to do that.
Huge.
So I can't remember. I think it was on Aaron Smith Levin. He has a YouTube channel called Growing Up in Scientology. And I think I was on one with him, and I said, the Sea organization is like the ultimate episode of Survivor, because when you get kicked off the island, that's it. It's over. It's done. And that's another crazy thing in the Sea organization. Everybody is trying to get leverage on you, and they're trying to get a level up. So there's a lot of backstabbing. And so you have this thing where I'm trying to do good and stay on the island, but everybody else on this island is trying to throw me off. Mm-hmm. And if I get thrown off, I'm done. I'm going to be homeless on the street. So I can't get thrown off. And so you got to play the game to be able to survive there. And then when they leave, and when you say, I said, I'm escaping, and you escape and you say, I don't want any, they say, and they have these hate websites up on all the ex-members who've ever spoken out. And they say, no, we threw you off the island. And you're like, I escaped. You wrote a thing saying that when I was declared a suppressive person that I had escaped. And now you're like, no, we threw you out. You were expelled. And I was like, I was expelled and the police helps expel me by like helping me escape? What?
Yeah, no, it's so crazy.
It's not only you're getting abused when you're there, but then when you leave, they continue to abuse you. And you're just like, is this for real? How do you guys do this under the guise of a religion and you're tax exempt? This is insanity.
But listening to you, because I became very interested in North Korea and people escaping from North Korea and what was going on there. Because again, in this day and age, it astounds me that we have all this intel on North Korea and can't do anything about it, essentially, right? Because it's exact. And what you're describing is what the people who escape from North Korea described, the exact same thing. Like they control you through food, through your family, through they indoctrinate you with all this philosophy, and you're forever saluting to whoever. And
Yeah.
it's just a few at the top who are getting really, fat and rich, and then the rest are just barely surviving. Yeah. Working. And then like you said, Scientology thinks that everybody on the outside thinks that this is an ideal lifestyle. Same in North Korea. People think because they're so anti-West. Well, how can like the United States or Canada or Australia or wherever say all these things, like North Korea is, this dangerous dictatorship, but they're allowing these things to go on in their own country? Like, it's such a it's so mind-blowing to me that it's like, well, we'll ignore them because of the religious proclamation, but there's no difference.
Well, it's so insidious that you go like, well, they're a religion, but then it's like, well, okay, well, why are they a religion? Who said they're a religion? The IRS. Since when is the IRS? Since when are they comprised of religious scholars? It's a weird system that the people that say whether you pay taxes or not are the ones that determine if you're a religion or not. And so you go like, what? And then you think like, why are these guys not paying taxes anyway? Like, why is anybody not paying taxes? Like, they're not benefiting the public. If anything, they're sort of a leech on society because they're costing, but they're not paying into the system. And then it shouldn't be a system where the tax man is the one who decides whether this has some sort of spiritual value to everybody, and that we all have to throw in because of that guy. And the only reason Scientology even gained tax exemption is because they filed thousands and thousands of lawsuits against individual IRS agents, and they basically shamed and crippled the IRS into giving them tax exemption. So that's how they did it. They did the same way they treat their members and the same way they treat ex-members by, gathering leverage. Oh, that's another thing I forgot. That kind of circles back to the writing thing. Hubbard also wrote this series called Mission Earth, which is after Battlefield Earth. And in Mission Earth, he has all these little kind of subplots and all these little lessons that you learn. And throughout the entire series, I think it's 10. Is it 10? I think volumes. It's 10 volumes. It could take you a year to read these things. It's a lot. I've read them all. Yeah. But one common thread throughout the entire series, all 10 books, is you always need leverage. You've always got to have leverage. And so that's in Scientology. Every part, any which way, they've always got leverage. When you do these counselings, you give up all these dirty, dark secrets. And so when you leave, it's like, well, I'd keep my mouth shut if I were you, because of all those dirty, dark secrets we got. And so that's the only reason that Claire and I are sort of a little more immune to these guys. We grew up there. We didn't do anything. We were like, what did you do back in 85? I was like, I was working for you in 85, like I've been with you the whole time. I didn't knock over any liquor stores, or we were working for you. What are you going to dig up on us?
Yeah. Even when they post these hate videos with my mom or my brother, or, people who worked with me saying how, she's a mean, evil person. I'm like, well, I was born into it. And
you created me.
Control over every aspect of my life from when I was 4 years old. So if that's your view, might want to go reevaluate things.
Yeah.